What up, what up, what up? Well, actually, I've been thinking about different ways I can lead into these podcasts, to this old tangent. And what up, what up, what up to me just sounds, even though I'm old, it sounds old. But it's me. That's how I talk. But I was, hey, or peace and love, everybody. Maybe I'll go to Erica Badu route or something. But what up, what up, what up? Let's get it. Oh, tangents. Welcome to Office Hour Tangents. I think this might be my seventh one. I'm trying to get on a roll. The tangents of the day in today's class, just a reiteration to those of you that, which is going to be most of you, that haven't been watching. If this is your first time watching, the premise is that I come here straight from class and I talk about the tangents that I may have went on in class. That's the basic premise. Sometimes I'll throw in there some tangents that I kind of had outside of class or something having to do with some tech news, have something having to do with creativity or something having to do with pop culture or hip hop, my love, but I'll always try to bring it back to the creative side. So this is the tangents that I went on. So in class today, again, the class that I'm teaching now is called Interactive Design 3. So in this class, we're pretty much on the second half of the class, and they're just now starting to like design their UI interfaces that they are redesigning. So just to set the stage, so the first thing I spoke about in class, I saw a news article today that announced that Canva, which is a design tool, I would call it a design tool that is browser based, that is very much designed for casual users, not necessarily. I mean, I have used it, but not necessarily for professional, designers. But it's designed for casual users, almost like a how Mac kind of creates its line of products like iMovie, iPhoto, stuff like that. So they just announced that they're acquiring a company called Affinity. And when I saw this, I knew it was a big headline, but I was like, I don't know Affinity. I've never heard of Affinity. So I looked it up real quick, and it turns out it's a suite of design, more professional leaning design programs. And Canva has decided to buy them. So I read the articles and I had some thoughts on it. And these are my thoughts on um, Canva acquiring a more professional leaning suite of design software. And if you want to go back to one of my previous O tangents, I was talking about, I want to say it's two back. I can't remember the title, but I was basically talking about Figma and Adobe. Well, I was talking about, I kind of tied it all together: Macromedia, Adobe, and Figma. I saw some synergies between what happened with Adobe and Macromedia back in the day, and how now Figma is kind of positioning itself in the design community. So that has some bearings to what I'm about to talk about now, because now Canva, another browser-based, very, very, very popular program, just like Figma is, but Figma is considered a professional leaning UI development software, whereas Canva presents itself more so as like for casual designers, people that just want to throw together a quick name, whatever you name, invite, poster, flyer, whatever. They could just kind of do it. They could start as a template. It's meant for speed and convenience, not necessarily power users. But, and I'm gonna go to split screen. So Canva is the logo on the left, and Affinity is the logo on the right. Now, logos have no bearing to anything, but Canva, a casual program, Affinity, a more professional leaning program. Canva, in my opinion, is, I have two thoughts. One thought, just overall, Canva is trying to grow. It's reached its peak with the casuals, and now it's trying to get into another arena. I want to show. Actually, they had and I'm not gonna show it. I'm just gonna say it. They had a quote in one of the articles. Um, it was a Canva spokesperson, and I don't want this podcast to be that where I'm researching and I make sure all my facts are correct. I'm just kind of like casually speaking, right? And one of the quotes, well, since I'm quoting, let me show the quote because I think I have the quote maybe pulled up. Here it goes. This is a tangent in itself. So this is just an article in the Verve. The Verge. This is where I read the article, and it's a very short article. It doesn't get really into deep waters, and I don't think some of the details have come out yet. But this quote right here. So I want to read this quote, and this is how I took it, just as a creative, right? That uses, that's been using Adobe products for my entire professional career. While our last decade at Canva has focused heavily on the 99% of knowledge workers, I never heard that term, knowledge workers. 99% of knowledge workers without design training, truly empowering the world to design includes empowering professional designers too. And I'll be honest, I was initially kind of like taken aback by that. Two. It's the two at the end of that statement. I'm gonna read it again, just because it hit me. It hit me somewhere. While our last decade at Canva has focused, so Canva been out 10 years. I didn't even know they've been out. I guess they've been out 10 years. 3 of those years were COVID, and that's a big hole in my psyche. But while our last decade at Canva has focused heavily on the 99% of knowledge workers, translation 99% of not even 90, just translation of 99% of knowledge workers. That means casual users. That means non-professional designers, right? Knowledge workers without design training. Truly empowering the world to design includes empowering professional designers too. It's that two at the end. It's just like two. Like, okay, I get it. You weren't focusing on us at first. And it seemed, this is how I translated it. We've reached the cap of what we can do with casual designers, with knowledge workers, without design training. So I guess we'll reach out to professional designers too. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, don't do me any favors. That's how I initially took it. Now, I don't matter to their whole, it doesn't matter. But maybe there's a million of us that do and maybe took that quote like that. But it's like, don't do us any favors. We have plenty of tools. Like, we don't need Canva to get stronger and then we're going to jump on Canva. Like, yeah, we'll include y'all too. Like, it's clear that y'all didn't want to include professional designers in the first place. So it just comes across to me like, and this is all conjecture for real, that, all these companies, they have investors, and the investors were riding a wave of success maybe for 10 of these years or 5 of those years. And they're like, okay, what's next? We've reached our cap. We even got 99.99% of the market that you were going for. What's next? And they're like, well, the only other thing we can think about is professional designers. Designers that do this stuff for real. And I'm like, now, it might form into something dope. It may. And I'll jump. I'm not married to Adobe by any means. Okay? So, so anyway, so that was the story I read. And that's the tangent I kind of spoke about in class. And it kind of tied into how back in the day, Adobe and Macromedia came on the scene a little later than Adobe, but then they gained traction real fast, and Adobe just gobbled them up and bought them. Like, if you can't beat them, buy them, right? And Figma tried to do the same thing. Adobe tried to do the same thing to Figma, right? And now seeing that Canva has purchased Affinity. Now, Affinity, let's look at Affinity a little real quick, because this is something new for me. So, okay, I'm another tangent. Okay, this is what I do, right? So, this is how I look at it. So, Canva is purchasing Affinity. Affinity has 3 professional leaning design programs, okay, that aren't subscription based like Adobe. It's like a one-time cost, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But I just want to go over kind of like you could tell just by the home pages of each website who they're marketing to. So Canva first. This is their homepage, right? I haven't logged in or anything. But look at the headline. What will you design today? They're not talking to me. They're not talking to Mr. Professional Designer guy. They're not talking to, they might not even be talking to design student. They're talking to somebody that just needs to throw together something real quick and doesn't want to pay anybody. That's kind of who they're talking to. Even though I know that a lot of people are getting paid using Canva. I use Canva when I want to do something quick and I don't feel like opening Photoshop, no doubt. But really, it's like Canva and then Photoshop is the equivalent. It's like Canva is Photoshop super light. It's like diet Photoshop. It's like super diet Photoshop. It's like Photoshop 1, if you want to call it that, right? What were you design today? The U is casual learner, of what the guy that had that quote, the knowledge worker. What will you design today, knowledge worker? Right? Just look at how it's laid out. You know, it starts off with start designing, and it's just like templates. What do you want to design? You want to design a presentation? We got a lot of templates. So you can just start. The only thing you got to do is add your text. Or you want to design something for social media, or you want to do the video stuff? We can help you with that stuff too. It's all like, we're going to give you head starts in this, which is a great business model, and it's successful as hell. I could just imagine. Now let's look at who Adobe is marketing to from its homepage. First thing, do it all with Adobe Creative Cloud, okay? And, not a lot of pictures from the homepage. This is Adobe's homepage changes all the time. It's kind of card-based now, but it's interesting because when I went to this a little before I got on this podcast, it's interesting too that the stuff above the fold, meaning the stuff that they want you to see because there's no guarantee that you will scroll and click on anything, it's leaning into free trial, right? Because Adobe's not cheap. And it's the 2 top cards are their more casual, focused new program, new software. Okay. So Adobe Firefly is basically Adobe's AI, right? It's kind of like Adobe's Dolly, Adobe's Midjourney. And it's not bad. It's not bad at all. So they're pumping that up, and then they're pumping up Adobe Express, which is, I think, the Adobe you can get on iPads and phones and stuff like that, I think. I haven't really used Adobe Express like that, but I believe it's more so that. Then you kind of get it, you go down and you start seeing this is more professional leaning, just from the look and feel of it, right? It's just, you could tell who they're going for. They're going for professional. That's their bread and butter, professional designers, right? As opposed to Canva is going after casuals. And right now, casuals are killing the game. Okay? Now let's look at Affinity, who Canva reportedly just bought. And this is new to me. Award-winning photo editing, graphic design, and page layout software for Mac, Windows, and iPad. That's important. That's super important right there. It's almost making me, I don't want to say excited, but Adobe better watch out. Adobe better watch out because, first of all, let's look at the wording. Award-winning photo editing. This is not for casuals. This is not casual-leaning software. This is award-winning. Casuals don't go up for awards. Professional designers go up for awards all the time. Okay? So, and then they just bring spotlight to their software, right? So Designer 2, that's their Photoshop equivalent, okay? And then they have, Designer 2 is their Illustrator. Their version of Illustrator. I don't even want to say that. It's their vector illustration program, right? Photo 2 is their photo manipulation software. And Publisher 2, as you may have guessed it, is their publishing software equivalent to Adobe InDesign. So they have the top 3 programs that Adobe makes its bread on: Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign, photo manipulation, illustration, and layout. Affinity has with Designer, Photo, and Publisher. Okay? And you could tell it's leaning towards professional designers, not casuals. So, by Canva purchasing Affinity, Canva overnight becomes a professional leaning option. Now, I don't know how they're going to work out, how they're going to do their photo software in Canva, because they're kind of redundant, but it's probably just going to work out kind of how Adobe has Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Express, right? So, or PS Express or whatever I have on my phone. I can't remember where I can do like basic photo and video editing. I think it's very interesting, but I'm going to go back to this key word I saw. Page layout software for Mac, Windows, and iPad. One thing I did notice, and I haven't noticed, and anybody want to put in the comments or anything like that, I don't think this is browser-based, which is, for power, a lot of times you don't want it to be browser-based, even though these browsers are becoming powerful. But, for photo manipulation, powerful photo manipulation, and if it's anything like Photoshop, it could do basic video stuff too. It's difficult to fit that out in the browser. I get. But the important thing is the iPad. Now, my students in my classes, 60% of them, 70% of them would prefer to use the iPad and not a computer. They don't like carrying the iPad and a computer. And the only reason they carry their laptops is because they need it for proper Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign. Because Adobe doesn't make iPad equivalents of those 3 softwares, right? They have like I said, Photoshop Express, so they have lower versions or different versions, but you don't want the kind of dumbed down version. You want the full version, so they must use their laptops. Now, if Affinity basically on the Mac, Windows, and iPad, this is the same exact program, that's, I don't want to say a game changer, but that's pretty sweet. That's going to force Adobe to make iPad equivalent Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign and maybe After Effects, right? So I think that's very interesting, and I'm kind of excited because competition makes things better. Competition made Adobe better when Macromedia was out. Macromedia was leaning into the screen-based stuff, and Adobe was mostly all print. And Macromedia made Adobe kind of step up his game. For a minute when it was competition, Adobe was kind of accelerating its updates, and they actually made a Macromedia Flash competitor. I forget the name of it. I should look it up, but whatever. It was Adobe made, because Flash was killing it at the time. Why not? It's a tangent. I want to see what the name of the thing was. Adobe Flash. No, Macromedia Flash. This is stupid. This is probably not good for podcasting. It's like me looking stuff up, but like I said, it's mine, so I can do whatever. Macromedia Flash, Adobe equivalent. Oh, this is going to be terrible. This is a terrible search. And I'm not spelling anything right. I'm just going to give up. Oh, I think it's called Adobe Motion, actually. I'm not even going to go deep into that. See, if I was really edit, I would edit that out, but I kind of get this and post it. I wish these were live. But anyway, I'm giving away what I'm going to talk about later. So anyway, I think it's interesting. Canva buying Affinity. So Canva will now have 3 professional leaning software choices and a casual choice for everybody else. Adobe better watch out. They're getting it from all directions. Figma, Canva, now Affinity together. What if Canva came out and said, hey, we got a partnership with Figma too. And this is like this whole thing to take down Adobe or to knock Adobe down a couple notches. Or you might see Adobe reach out and try to acquire something else, right? I think the Figma thing fell through. Haven't really followed that lately, but I don't know if they're still trying to work on it. Last time I saw it, they're still trying to work that deal out, but that deal fell through. It might start looking around, or it might start developing new software. It's really, they have a glut of software. If you look at the Creative Cloud site, there's just too many programs, to be honest. I won't say too many, it has everything, right? But I'm assuming their big three is Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. But now Canva has a big three too. So very interesting. Now that was one of the tangents, and another one of the tangents was I was talking about actually how it feels to be educator, like to be a teacher, to be a professor, specifically being a professor, because I think it's a little different being in college and then being like maybe K through 12. But I started talking about, so when I walk into class, my class starts at 3 p.m. And at 3 p.m., that's after lunch. That's a full couple hours after lunch. That's after they've had maybe one or two classes before. Some of them work. By 3 p.m., it's almost the end of the day. And I walk in and I say, hey, what's up, everybody? And they're like, or, they're like just not there. And it's up to me. Like, I got to get them. I'll clap, I'll do something like, hey, what's up? What's the new hotness? What's going on in the world of creativity or tech? Anybody want to talk about anything? And I try to be an excitement, but usually I get, which is uncomfortable. That uncomfortable silence is uncomfortable to me as a professor, to anybody, right? So I just decided to go on this little tangent when I was talking about, how I am a professor now, but that's not, what I sought, that's not what I in high school was saying. This is what I'm gonna do when I grow up. This is not what I was in college saying. This is what I'm gonna do when I graduate. This is not when I was working at Nationwide Insurance as a designer saying, hey, I'm gonna leave here and I'm gonna start teaching. Now, I did write a note to my mentor saying, you know what, if I chose to teach, I would be a dope teacher. And he kept that note. But I was saying it facetiously, like, there's no way I'm gonna teach though. Like, that seems terrible. So, but I'm teaching now because as I grew and as opportunities presented themselves, and, when I went back to school, I taught to pay for education, and I'm like, I kind of like what I'm doing. So anyway, I kind of went through that, but I told them how difficult sometimes it is not to teach the subject matter, but to just keep students engaged, which is very difficult. Especially now, the school I'm at Linden University right now, and we're on this block schedule. And I don't want to go into the block schedule because I'm not a fan. But what it is classes are 2.5 hours long, right? Classes are 2.5 hours long. And it is very difficult to hold the attention of a 21-year-old for 2.5 hours, right? So I went into, like, I'm really into right now for the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, I'm really into comedians and studying comedians and watching not just comedy shows, but reading books by comedians and watching podcasts and watching documentaries. And I really think that comedians are some of the geniuses we have roaming this earth, like the good ones, right? And because they see the world different, but I always respected them for the simple fact that, especially the stand-up comedians, comedians that can get on stage and make people laugh. Like, not even get on stage and make people laugh, consistently make people laugh, right? To get people to laugh, they have to be listening to you. That means that you have to keep them engaged. And it's difficult, and I'm like, how difficult can that be? Like, how difficult is that they spent money to laugh too? Sometimes upwards of $100, $200, $300. So they paid money to laugh. Even if they paid $20 to get into the funny bone or the improv or something, they still paid money to laugh. They got dressed up, they got to buy 2 drinks, and you better make me laugh, right? So I'm like, how difficult is that? Like, we played that game when we was little, like, try to make each other laugh. And when you're like trying to make somebody laugh, it's very difficult to make them laugh, right? You got to resort to like craziness because they're really trying not to laugh. And a lot of people come to comedy shows trying not to laugh, almost like, are your jokes worthy of my laughter? And if not, I'm gonna be stone faced. I might heckle you. I might get on Twitter and say your show is trash. I might film you and show people how trash you are. So when I watch good comedians stand up, I concentrate on how they keep the crowd engaged, right? How they come out, how they greet them. I don't really go too deep into it. Like, I'm not mimicking what they're doing, but I'm trying to learn. And I told the students that, like, I feel like for as long as I have you in here, that I owe it to you to give you content, right? And I'm not big on work days. Like, hey, today's gonna be a work day, and for 2 hours, like, you can't leave, you must work. I'm not big on that. A lot of professors do that, and that's dope for them. Like, this is not me. Like, if you're with me, I'm teaching, I'm talking, we're critiquing, we're doing something. And if it's work time, you can stay here and work, or you can go somewhere else and work. I know, it's not comfortable for everybody to work in class. So anyway, I had to explain to them how being a professor is almost like, and this, I don't want to disrespect comedians at all because it's not even close. I know it for sure, no doubt. But I do have a captive audience in front of me that paid money, a lot of money, to learn, not to laugh, but to learn, right? So I feel like for instance, I remember this comedian, I forgot who it was. I want to say it was Martin. It was one of his stand-ups, and he had to go get some water. And I think it was Martin. He had to go get some water, and it was a pause. Just him like, let me get some water. Just that pause in the show was uncomfortable. Just that silence, that uncomfortable 5 seconds of silence was uncomfortable. But he took a sip of water and he made a comment like, I know y'all like, man, get you these jokes, hurry up. And, like, and it's real. Like, people, you got like thousands of people looking at you like, hurry up, man. We don't got time for you to get water. And I feel like that sometimes as a professor. Like, sometimes I do have to get water. Sometimes I have to cough. Sometimes I have to get my thoughts together. But I feel like I really don't have time to. Like, I got to keep it going, right? And trying to explain to students how I try to keep it going. I went on another tangent into, hey, out of this classroom, 1 or 2 of you may end up in the profession that I'm in. You might, you never know. But a lot of times we don't have classes that teach people how to be teachers, right? Teach professors how to be professors. So I was like giving them a little game in my experience of being engaging. So I was like, that's why I come in here, and I'm like asking y'all what y'all learned just in the last 24 hours. What was hot? What video games you play? Anybody watch any sports? Anybody watch any March Madness last night? The students, usually design students that be in my class, they don't watch sports. So I can't even go down that line. But I always get them with games, right? I always get them with games. There's always somebody in there that's a gamer or they understand gaming. So that's how I can connect with them, right? Sometimes I can connect with them through hip hop. Sometimes I can connect through them using fashion. I try to connect with them I try to meet them halfway, right? I see you're back there and I see you're in the anime somehow. Let's tighten. Even though I don't know a lot about anime, I'll mention it. I'll talk about whatever I do know, and then it kind of gets the conversation going, and it builds that synergy. So that was another one of the tangents that I like. I try to provide little tidbits in class outside of the project at hand that may be valuable for him down the line. Because I remember some of those tidbits I got from various professors and teachers throughout my lifetime that, I might not remember 98% of what they said in class. I guarantee I don't remember anything they said in class. But I remember some of these tidbits. Some of these things, these actions, they might not even said it. They just did it. I remember my high school, was it calculus? I think it was high school calculus I think I was in calculus 2 in high school. I can't remember. High school calculus teacher. I think her name is Miss Henderson. And I don't remember a lot what she was talking about, but I remember one time she was explaining because she was a student. I think she was probably getting her master's or something. She was currently a student talking to us about her perspective being a student, which was interesting. Like in high school, I'm like, oh, teachers can go to school while they're teaching. And she was talking about how her professor, how his body language affected her. And I never forgot that my whole life. Because she was like, I had some questions, but he said, she kept on saying his stance was always like this. Like every time he spoke to us or spoke to me, his arms were crossed. And she perceived that as being defensive. And it made her uncomfortable. She didn't feel like she can ask him questions. And I never forgot that. So since then, I really try not to chill like this. If I'm talking, I try not to do this. I always snap back like, that looks defensive. It looks like a barrier to conversation or a barrier to contact. So I just remember that. I remember when she said that. And like I said, I just try to feed students tidbits like that if I can and when I can. So that was another tangent that I went on, right? I told you there's a few tangents today. The last tangent, this didn't come from class, but it started before class, actually on my way to class. And actually not on my way because I was texting, so that wouldn't have been safe. But it involved, I'm going to show you what it involved. I gave it away earlier. But it involved hip hop. One of the loves, top of my list of things I love to talk about, listen to, be immersed in. I am a part of the hip hop culture. And right now there's a debate on who's better. You know, this kind of conversation comes up, every few years, like who's the best. And then they kind of choose a couple, or in this case, 3 hip hop, I would say MCs to like kind of go against each other. And in this case, sometimes they'll come out with diss tracks and everything. So anyway, people consider these 3 guys the what they call it, the big 3 in hip hop right now. Now, probably yes. As far as like album sales and anticipation and consistency and lyrics and skills, because they're like 3 of the Mohicans of like the era of rap skills. Like I'm gonna get on this mic and I'm about to like demonstrate some real lyrical dexterity, and you're gonna have to like rewind and see what I'm talking about. Right? I think a lot of people after them, I would even throw Wayne in there to be honest. But a lot of people after them, we started seeing more of the mumble, more of the, the auto tune. We still got skills, but you seeing more of it. So anyway, Kendrick Lamar, this is the guy on the right, if you don't know. So Kendrick Lamar came out with a track that is quote unquote dissing Drake and a little bit J. Cole. So this is Drake in the middle, J. Cole, right? And, the blogospheres went crazy, the Twitterverse went crazy, the wherever you want to look went crazy. And it's a great debate, right? Because it's like a debate amongst the A-plus MCs. So I was going back and forth with my boys, and I was like, you take sides. But usually I kind of like, I always offer like a generalized opinion before I settle on who I think will win, right? And in a nutshell, I'm not going to go over that now, but I actually think Drake will win this battle. Whatever. Like, people that hollering at the screen are thinking like, yeah, right. Like, come on, man, let's look at it for real. And I'm just not going to spend too much time because this is not the purview of this podcast, but hey, it's a tangent. In my opinion, Drake is the most battle-tested. Drake is the most like LL Cool J than the other 2 of them. Or than most MCs out. And remember, LL really never lost. I won't say that. I think he lost a couple battles, but he never lost any of the wars. He always came out on top at the end. I think he lost to Kumo D lyrically, and I think he lost to I'm talking about LL. He lost to Kumo D lyrically with How You Like Me Now. I think How You Like Me Now was doper than any of his diss tracks to Kumo D. And I think that Cannabis beat him in the battle. That second round knockout, play that right now. That song is super dope. That almost put Cannabis in superstar status overnight. It was so dope. He had Mike Tyson in it. It was crazy, right? And LL came out with a response, and it was like, it was all right, but it wasn't. But, you know, he's LL. Like, he just kind of went ham and went in, and he made sure he did not lose. I feel like that about Drake. Two things. LL makes his bread marketing a lot to females. Everybody knows that. You know, ladies love Cool James. That's part of his name. He's licking his lips. He's being sexy. He got a six-pack. Right. But he will battle anybody to this day. Like, if somebody went against LL right now, he would go in the lab and he would write something down. Like, no doubt. Him and KRS-One are like that, right? But KRS-One is a rapper's rapper. LL is a rapper's rapper, but he's going to throw in a lot of those R&B syrupy songs, too, because he knows where his bread is buttered. Drake, the same thing. Drake came out rapping. I'm a fan of Drake from back in the day, from Room for Improvement mixtape. Rapping. But he saw, you know, he has more to offer, so he's singing more. Like, it's not my cup of tea. Like, I can't stand the For the Dogs album. Like, I listened to it once, like, yuck. That's just, ugh. It's just not for me. It's not made for me. It's made for women. It just really is, and it's made for chilling. And then he came out with, I think it's called the Scary Hours version. In Volume 2, there's a Volume 2 on that. So go to Volume 2, and he's rapping on all 6 of those songs. I encourage you, if you haven't done it, I think it seems like that's the precipice for some of this stuff that Kendrick may be going in on. Because I don't know none of my boys knew the Scary Hours edition existed. And if you just kind of play it it just plays the old album, but it has a Volume 2 on it where he's rapping. It seems like a response to people like me probably coming out like, yo, man, what's up with this syrupy, singy songy, the whole album? So anyway, I think he's more like LL than anybody. He's more battle-tested than these two. He's been in more battles. He's been in, you know, I'm not going to name them, but Pusha T. He's been in battles with Meek Mill. He's been in battles with battle rappers. And he never gets drugged. How about that? He wins some of these, and he never gets drugged. So he's battle-tested. Kendrick comes out every once in a while. Kendrick is more akin to Andre 3000 than KRS-One, right? Kendrick has all the skills in the world. You know, we kind of look at him like a mythical figure to the point where, but he's like, he also comes across as reclusive, and he comes out when he comes out, almost like a groundhog. Like, when's he gonna come out? Like, oh, he's out. Like, kind of like 3000. Like, drop one of the craziest verse ever, then you won't hear another verse for 5 years. That's K-Dot. Like, he did his verse. I'm not even sure he'll do another one. Like, for real. I could see Drake, though, dropping like 6 songs. You know, with all these ties into the 6 and Canada and 6 and the devil and all this stuff. Like, I could see him just going ham. Like, I could see Drake doing that, right? And those of you that say he has a team of writers, so what? Like, whatever. The song's going to drop and it's going to be dope or not. Like, that's how it is. And then Cole, you know, he's more akin to Native Tongues to me. He's just, you know, he has bars. I think he can bar up, and I think he can actually win this battle if he wanted to. But I don't actually think he wants to. I just think he wants to be considered one of the greatest. And he might throw a subliminal here and there that's like deep, just like K-Dot would throw something deep. You listen to it the first time, you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. But then, like, you got to listen to a podcast or a blog or a YouTube video of somebody breaking down each line. See, in this line, he was talking about, when he mentioned the Smurfs back in the day and Gargamel, and then he said Gargamel. You know. I get it, but I don't want to, a lot of times, I don't want to have to study my raps. There is something to be said about creating easily understandable raps. If people have to go to the encyclopedia or ask AI to decipher your rap or and make it, you know, easy to understand for a fourth grader, nah, I'm not gonna want to listen to that rap every time. That's why I listened to K Dot's most recent album, the one he got nominated for, a masterpiece of an album. I remember when it came out, I was like, masterpiece, genius level masterpiece album. You know how many times I listened to that album? Twice. I listened to him twice. Because it's like, it's not the album I put in when I'm just in the whip. It's not the album I'm gonna put in when I'm cutting my hair. It's just, it's almost like listening to an album like I was reading a book. Like, okay, I gotta be ready to listen to this album. Cause I'm a listen. And I love that. But, all the deciphering going on, it's just a lot. But Drake used to make albums that you would just keep playing, put on loop, right? J. Cole, the same thing. I don't want to say he used to. He still does. He's still in there. J. Cole, because J. Cole, he raps. Like, he raps. He sings a little bit, but he doesn't use auto-tune. But he's a rapper. Like, you buy a J. Cole album, you're going to hear rapping. You buy a Drake album, I don't know. You buy a K. Dot album, I don't know. But you buy a Cole album, you're going to hear rapping, right? So, going back, I think Drake is going to win his album. But, to tie it back to design, another thing you'll see about these three personalities. So, okay, another tangent real quick. You're talking about the big three in hip-hop. To me, if you're talking about lyricism, to me, right now, it's Ransom, Conway, and Royce da 5'9". That's my big three right now. As far as if you want to hear people just rapping, no auto-tunes, the hardest beats you can get, those three are the real big three as far as lyrics concerned. In my opinion, I don't care what you think. These three guys, they're going to sell way more records. They're more mainstream, right? They're winning Grammys. These guys are just on another level as far as that's concerned. But you look at their branding of them. Notice that the two guys on the outside, are wearing their hair natural, right? It's kind of like, I read this article, Jay-Z, it's like like I said, I didn't go deep. I just heard this, when a black man decides he wants to show society that he's not through with it, but just kind of transcending it, a lot of times they'll show it first through their hair. Or not, I don't want to say first. They'll show it through their hair. So just case in point, Jay-Z, for years, same haircut, fade, 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 fade with a part, fade, fade with a part. When he finally kind of got to his now current Jay-Z status, where he's more of a businessman, he could have leaned and then became very corporate. Kept that fade, started dressing in suits. Nah, he let his hair grow. He barely shaves. He comes out looking like he smells sometimes. You get that Basquiat look. Basquiat walking around look like he might have put some deodorant on. I don't know. You kind of get to that point. Like, those two guys on the outside, they had that feel. Like, if I just ran into J. Cole at the mall, he might have a must to him. I wouldn't be surprised. He's like above it all. Like, I don't care if you think I'm musty. Right? Same thing with K. Dot. He's a true artist, He's going to do what he feels. Look at his hair. Look at his style. Like, he's not following trends. Right? But that guy in the middle, he's trendy. That dude follows all the trends. He puts a heart in his part. He always has a tight fade. Even when he grows his hair out, it's tight. It's a tight edge up. Right? I've never seen Drake with a beard that was scraggly. He understands his brand and when he's going out. And I would concede to say it's hard to kind of like look scraggly. I've tried it. I tried it in college. I tried to go to college and I didn't like this. I didn't like being perceived as a pretty boy. So I'd like grow out my beard and I just wore the same stuff. And I tried to look scraggly as possible because I was going to Pitt and Pitt's kind of like scraggly. And, it's a bunch of dudes from Pitt, a bunch of dudes from New York and DC and Philly. And they just had a different bop. And I'm trying to look not pretty boyish. It just didn't work. It's just tough. It's just tough. When you have like a braid of hair like mine, it's just tough. I get it. But anyway, tangent. But you look at their brands and it's like, I could see people taking sides based on who they see themselves in, which is, I think this is an interesting battle right here. if you think about like past battles, you know, Tupac versus Biggie, you know, it was easy to like people on the East Coast identify with Biggie, people on the West Coast identify with Pac. Thugs identify with Pac, you know, hustlers identify with Biggie, right? Fat people identify with Biggie, little short, in shape people identify with Pac. It was like they were complete different, right? They were, I don't want to say they were opposites. They were like completely different. Some of the other battles back in the day, a lot of them were like hood based, you know, who's hood, like KRS-One versus MC Shan, you know, Queens versus the Bronx. But a lot of times people identify with who they just kind of like look like or who they prefer as far as like how they carry themselves. K Dot out of the three is the most unique to me. Like he's the most, like I look at K Dot, like K Dot's very unique. Like there's not another K Dot out there. It's kind of like Andre 3000 to be honest. Like, but there's a lot of, I take that back. I do know a lot of people that basically resemble, not necessarily from looks, but just kind of like actions, K Dot, Kendrick Lamar. But I see way more people that look like Drake, right? My students, they be like, you know what you look like? Pressure Craft? And I'm like, Drake and J. Cole. Oh, how you, people told you that before? Yeah, like, I always say it's racist. Like, y'all being racist. They're like, what? And I'm like, just because they light skinned and got facial hair, they look like me. So, but I see a lot more people that look like Drake and J. Cole. And, you know, J. Cole keeps his chipped tooth. J. Cole just looks like he's just trying to be normal. He's trying to stay normal. That's why I don't think he's going to win this battle, because I don't think he even wants to win this battle. Like, I just think he wants to be normal. He'll drop a subliminal. He'll drop a subliminal, no doubt. He will, and it'll be dope. But it's like you're going to have to buy his whole album and listen to all the songs, and then like, oh, he dropped the subliminal on track 7. Like about 2 minutes in, he dropped this little subliminal about, I think it's about Drake. He was talking about, you know, the 6 and this, and, you know, he'll do that, no doubt. But Drake, everybody knows Drake. Everybody knows somebody that looks like Drake. All my friends know somebody that looks like Drake. It's me. I'm not saying I look like Drake, but it's like, look at that silhouette, like tight haircut, facial hair, lighter complexion. That's a lot of people. You know, he doesn't really go and try to look on purpose unique. I think Jay-Z's doing that right now. He's like, I don't say it's purposely. I just think he makes him comfortable right now. But he's like, you know, he's leaning into his unique look. Jay-Z's always been a unique looking dude. And right now he's just totally leaning into it. Like, yeah, I'm going to lean into this everything about me, right? Which is dope. I think K-Dot does that. I think J. Cole does that. Drake doesn't do that. Well, he does that for himself, but, you know, he's putting hearts in his parts. You know, he's like 40-something. He's putting hearts in his parts. So, anyway, I was talking to my boys about this, but I wanted to kind of get into, like, they was approaching it, like, my boy Scoot, he was approaching it more so, like, lyrics. Like, J. Cole, no, he was like K-Dot. He was like, K-Dot would destroy anybody in the game, like, anybody. He was like, KRS-One included. Like, I knew he was serious when he said that. Because nobody can get with KRS when it comes to any battle, anywhere. And if you know, you know. Like, you don't even want to try it. He might have an algorithm that sees this podcast, and he's like, who said something about KRS-One in the battle? Then he drops it like a quick freestyle that's just doper than a lot of people's writtens, dissing somebody just because he has that itch. He just seems like he always has that itch to just kind of like get at somebody real quick. These dudes don't do that. KRS-One would come out, and if he's dissing me, he'd be like, oh, B Craft? You a sucker. Like, he'll start it off like that. You know what I'm saying? K-Dot will rap about something else, and did a lyrical miracle whip, and then he'll like, and then, you know, it gets too deep sometimes. I forgot, what did he say? He said something about, you know, the Pet Cemetery. And it's like, if you just hear it in the whip, like, oh, that's dope. But then it's like, oh, the Pet Cemetery. He's talking about Drake because his last album was called For the Dogs, and he's going to end up in the Pet Cemetery. Like, that's dope. I'm like, is it? rap is supposed to be understandable. I'm supposed to understand it if I'm trying to. I shouldn't have to like keep on deciphering it. I just don't. This is not my preference all the time, you know. So anyway, I think it's interesting. The branding of these three guys is very unique. From a battle standpoint, I don't see it as a battle because look at these, and I'm not even gonna show their real pictures. Like, I mean, come on, man. Like, I wouldn't put it past that they've planned this all out, and they'll drop a joint album next year and call it. They'll call it. I said it earlier to my boys. They'll call it. I'm gonna go because I think it's interesting. They'll call it. I forgot, but it was a play on their names. Oh, Jack Moves. They'll call it Jack Moves. That's an idea if they catch this, which they won't, but it's cool. Somebody hit them up. They can call it Jack Moves. That'll be a dope name for an album with 3 of these. Jack Moves. J-A-K. Jack Moves. Jermaine, Aubrey, and Kendrick. Jack Moves. Now, they may have some beefs about whose name is first, but Jack Moves. Or Jacked Up. Or Get Jacked. Or something. Right? Why not? Get this money. Like, battle each other. Go at each other's throats. Then make an album. Get that bread. Then write a book together. Talking about, it's split up into 3 sections. Talking about y'all's traverses through hip hop culture. That's what those kind of dudes need to do. I expect that from these dudes. I expect a book. I expect a documentary. I expect a production company. You know what I'm saying? They understand that they're reaching kind of like the retirement age for rappers. And I could see them seeing what's next. I could see a podcast, like everybody has a podcast, me included. But I could see them having a podcast, the Jack Moves podcast, where they kind of offer their own takes on stuff in the world. I'll watch it. I'd pay for that, really. So I think that's it for my tangents for the day. So those are the things that I was kind of pondering today. Those are the things that I was talking to my students about. Just to reiterate, talking about the acquisition of Affinity by Canva, how that's going to change the game. It's going to light a fire on Adobe. Adobe, if they do this right, if Canva does this right, this is going to be the first like true competitor to Adobe that's came along in a while, and I'm all for it. Let's get it. I have no affinity to Adobe. I like Adobe. I've used Adobe, but they nickel and dime you to death. Like you can't be poor and use Adobe, right? So, and then I talked about, how to keep a classroom attentive. How I try to keep a classroom attentive using some tropes that I'm gaining from watching comedians, right? And then something I was talking to my boys earlier about K-Dot, J. Cole, and the Drake beef happening right now. I find it amusing, but interesting, and I'm interested to see what's coming next. So, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, peace.